Europeans are willing to work with the United States because the transatlantic relationship is so strong and so important and rooted in their defense policies and in the security of Europe over decades since the 20th century. The elements are there for a strong new transatlantic partnership. The
Hmm.
question is more what the attitude of the Trump administration will be to a Europe that is more capable, more confident, and willing to partner, but willing to partner on its terms. It is unlikely there will be a full and comprehensive peace agreement in 2026. The parties are simply too far apart on the terms of an agreement. And I'm not talking about territory. The Russian Federation and Vladimir Putin himself have a whole list of requirements of Ukraine, including never being a member of NATO, limits on its military, restrictions on international cooperation in defense that simply are not on the table for Europe or for Ukraine. I would observe and advise that it's not merely signaling, that the real military capabilities in the region suggest that if there is not some kind of diplomatic resolution on key issues that the White House has put on the table with the leadership in Iran, that the United States is quite serious about considering real military options in a conflict with Iran.
Hello and welcome. I'm Pranay Upadhyay, and you are watching India Today Global. The world is facing a lot of economic, geopolitical tensions these days. Which way the world dynamics are moving? A brainstorming session is underway in Munich as part of the Munich Security Conference. The global security experts and diplomats have gathered there, and the brainstorming is on that how to resolve the tensions. To discuss this issue and which way the U.S. policies are driving and trying to resolve these tensions. I'm being joined by the former Assistant Secretary of Defense, Celeste Wallander. Welcome to India Today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Celeste, my first question to you that currently, I'm sure you must have heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio trying to assure the European audience that US is in favor of working the transatlantic cooperation, the NATO. But in your opinion, how worried are you right now about the future of the transatlantic cooperation? Do you see it cracking under the pressure as far as the Trump administration's policy shifts are concerned? And could this actually weaken the NATO at the worst possible time?
Well, I think that the Europeans heard a nicer tone in Secretary Rubio's speech, but the same message. And the
Hmm.
message was one of American willingness to partner with Europe in the transatlantic relationship on American terms.
Mhm.
American terms of reducing presence in Europe, demanding more contributions by Europe, and more of what he referred to as a common civilizational past rather than a common interest and values-based future. But Europeans are willing to work with the United States because the transatlantic relationship is so strong and so important and rooted in their defense policies and in the security of Europe over decades since the 20th century. What is clear is that Europe is stepping up to spend more and spend better on defense, modern defenses, better defense procurement, better defense production, better planning, the
Mhm.
whole array of responsibilities. So the elements are there for a strong new transatlantic partnership. The
Mhm.
question is more what the attitude of the Trump administration will be to a Europe that is more capable, more confident, and willing to partner, but willing to partner on its terms. And I think Munich is the start of that process, not the end. But the signs are positive.
But you say that the signs are positive. Secretary Marco Rubio spoke in a very assuring tone. But yesterday President Donald Trump made a social media post where he put out an image, though AI generated image of Greenland with a heart shape and clearly trying to define the situationship between United States and the relationship with Greenland. So with all these indication, with this his policy push for Greenland. How worried European partners are currently? I'm sure you must have had, a chance to talk to your European counterparts and as well as, some of your friends there in Europe.
Yeah, Europeans across the board are very clear that it is well within the transatlantic relationship for the United States to have discussions with the Kingdom of Denmark and with Greenland on American presence, on American reinforcement of military presence, investment in infrastructure, but that the terms for those discussions must be recognition of the sovereignty of Greenland and of Greenland as a constituent element of the Kingdom of Denmark. And Europeans across the board are firmly with Denmark and Greenland on that position. So negotiations on how there can be a stronger relationship and a stronger US presence in Greenland is definitely on the table. I personally have been, when I was Assistant Secretary, I have been to our military base in Pitufik. It is an extraordinary facility based on fantastic historic partnership, and building on that would be very much in our common interest. What is not acceptable for Europe and frankly for the American public, as opinion polls show, would be an American invasion of Greenland or assertion of taking over of sovereignty of parts or all of Greenland. So if we are in negotiations, this can be resolved constructively, and we'll have to see what that image that President Trump tweeted portends for the coming weeks.
In your opinion, do you see that this policy is sustainable, or do you see President Donald Trump backing off from his push for Greenland?
I don't have insight into the conversations inside of the White House. I think what we've seen is that President Trump and his team float a lot of ideas and kind of test the waters. And when they see resistance, or when they see that their ideas will not actually play out in a way that is cost effective and that is supportable and that can move forward in a constructive way, they tend to back off. We've seen that in certain areas of tariffs, trade policy, economic policy. And so I think that no one knows the answer to your question, but I do know what the answer of Europe will be to a forceful move by the Trump administration, which would be to take a principled stand against such a move.
Ms. Wallander, President Donald Trump is, in fact, at least in his statement, he has been very serious in pushing for, or rather finding a solution for the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Soon, we would be entering the 5th year of Russia-Ukraine conflict. He's trying to find a solution or have a ceasefire or an arrangement by mid of 2026. Talks are stumbling in Geneva, and we have seen how the parties are unable to find an amicable or an acceptable solution. Security guarantees are supposedly have worked out, but do you see a realistic path to ceasefire that doesn't leave Ukraine vulnerable? The security assurances are there because we heard President Zelensky clearly is calling out all the European partners to come together. That because he said that that is the unity of Europe is the only answer for Russia. Your thoughts?
So I think that it is unlikely there will be a full and comprehensive peace agreement in 2026. The parties are simply too far apart on the terms of an agreement. And I'm not talking about territory. The Russian Federation and Vladimir Putin himself have a whole list of requirements of Ukraine, including never being a member of NATO, limits on its military, restrictions on international cooperation in defense that simply are not on the table for Europe or for Ukraine. Even if the United States were willing to go in that direction to get a peace agreement, Ukraine is not and Europe is not. There is a possibility of a ceasefire, as you noted, in the middle of the year. I don't think that a ceasefire itself would require as robust a set of security guarantees. If it were a genuine ceasefire, you would need international forces, observer forces at minimum. Russia would have to adjust its negotiating position to allow international observers for a ceasefire. But coming back to your core question about security guarantees, I think it's important for people to understand that security guarantees, credible security guarantees, are not just words. You can say that you will help to defend a country, But what really deters an adversary from attacking a victim like Ukraine is the promise, not just in words, but in actual actions of defense, credible defense. And so the United States would have to be willing and able to deploy credible military forces to Ukraine for a real security guarantee. And Vladimir Putin has made very clear that that is not acceptable for Russia, neither for a peace agreement nor for a ceasefire. So while I take your question about whether the United States would be willing to say the words and make the kind of military deployments necessary for a security guarantee, I think the prior question is whether Moscow would agree to that in any kind of arrangement, including a ceasefire. And the answer is pretty clear that President Putin would not agree to that.
Moving on, let's talk about the West Asia tensions as well, because tensions with Iran are spiking. Two of the U.S. aircraft carriers are there in the CENTCOM region. How close do you think that the world is towards another military conflict or another military action led by the United States in West Asia, especially on Iran? And do you think that there could be a headway in the diplomatic negotiations, because Oman hosted the diplomatic negotiations in between April and May as well, but that didn't work out. So how hopeful are you? And do you mean that we are already on a very strained path?
So this array of military capabilities that the United States has moved to the Middle East is a larger and more robust and varied, differentiated type of military deployment than the United States has deployed in previous rounds of kind of pressuring Iran, especially on its relationships with Israel, and trying to deter Iran also from attacking U.S. forces in the Middle East. So I think Iran and indeed the international community should take that very seriously. Those forces could be there for the White House using to signal and to pressure Iran on issues such as its nuclear program, its support for proxies in the Middle East and elsewhere, and to really put significant pressure on the Iranian leadership. But I think I would observe and advise that it's not merely signaling, that the real military capabilities in the region suggest that if there is not some kind of diplomatic resolution on key issues that the White House has put on the table with the leadership in Iran, that the United States is quite serious about considering real military options in a conflict with Iran. Whether that enhances the importance of third-party support for those negotiations, I think I agree with the premise of your question, is the urgency of helping to persuade Iran to find ways to negotiate with the United States really is higher than it has ever been. And third-party support for those kinds of negotiations really should be motivated by the extent of the American military deployment in the region.
Ma'am, before I let you go, a last question: that do you think President Donald Trump's maximum pressure policy, be it on Iran or be it in the Caribbean, we have seen the outcome of these maximum pressure policies, or the weaponization of tariff as a tool? Do you think that these are sustainable? Because the biggest worry is that U.S. might end up losing its partner and the alliances which the United States have built for years.
It's a terrific question. I think as long as these instances of maximum pressure are targeted on regimes and countries that the alliances generally agree, those countries have been a threat, have behaved in unsustainable ways that harm the interests of those allies, that alliances, current American alliances, can manage those instances of pressure. What would be problematic, and I think what you've heard in Munich, is that that kind of maximum pressure is not appropriate within an alliance such as NATO or within the alliances that the United States has in the Asia-Pacific region and indeed globally. So that kind of relationship is not one that would translate well to intra-alliance politics. And that message, I think, has been made clear to Washington here in Munich.
Thank you very much for your time, for sharing your thoughts and perspective, ma'am. And We hope that the policy direction will be judiciously pursued, and we might find a more amicable solution to these conflicts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.